on ordinance 550. An ordinance to impose a moratorium on large apartment structures. We read the whole moratorium?
Nope, you can just introduce it and see if there's any public comment.
Do I have any? I guess we have to wait a few minutes to see.
Okay.
Okay. We still have some time for public comments on the moratorium. And the comments are limited to 3 minutes and they can only be addressing the moratorium.
Of course, how could anyone have guessed? Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill Gross, 1301 13th Street. And my time should start now. Thank you, Planning Commission, for holding the meeting. I find it interesting that we're at this corner after 4 years or 5 years of me repeatedly apologizing for bringing up the same subject over and over and over again, using the same words that we're talking about, putting a moratorium on large projects and building. This board, other commissions, even council has said, you know, we got a lot of traffic, we got a lot of congestion, and with flooding, people could die. So I really appreciate the fact that my conversations with certain people in our administration might have paid off, but it's about time. And I have looked into it. It'll cost the city money, but it can retroactively be placed on projects that have not broken ground, but have been approved. So it's up to our city solicitor and the different commissions and boards to enforce this moratorium on those projects as well. It's within the city's right. And I did consult 2 attorneys, one being a real estate attorney, so I know for a fact that can be done. Number 2, in regards to this, I would appreciate that this board and all boards, all commissions and the city, when topics come up and the public needs to refer to what's on the agenda, that there is a link that one can print out what's coming up as part of the agenda. 550, no link online. I've been away on the tall ship Trinidad that was in town for 3 weeks. So I just got back, so there was absolutely no time nor no need for me to put a FOIA request in, which would take 15 days. It should be provided on the city site for each meeting, for each document that needs to be referred to speak. Thank you for hearing me and for considering this 550, which again, no details. So I and the public don't know what large projects, apartment projects entail. So it's just as vague as all the information that's been passed down to the residents. of
Thank
the
you. That's
city
your
of
time.
Newcastle. Thank you.
Evening to the commission, professional advisors, neighbors and friends. My name is Brian Madaway. I'm here this evening to listen and to learn. I have a tremendous amount of respect for the commission, its individual commissioners and the work that you all do to build and make our community better. I will be diligently listening and learning and respect your commentary as you deliberate. I do believe in the merits of this potential ordinance, and we will be prepared at the appropriate time to comment on that, which will be at next month's city council meeting. Thank you again for all you do to help our community. We spend lots of hours and a lot of times you go unappreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. No further comments?
It would be the rule of the chair, you can take a recess until 7.
And we will recess
Until 7.
until 7. Public hearing is now.
Make a motion.
Do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
I second, Kristen.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm calling to order the City of Newcastle Planning Commission. The first order on our agenda is roll call. David, you want to start us out?
Yes, David Majewski. Tim Gibbs.
Margot Rain,
Kristen Zumar.
Ray Rivera.
Cynthia Batty.
Okay, and we do have a quorum. Our next order of business is the approval of minutes from the August 26th, 2024 meeting. Do I have any corrections to those minutes?
I would just like to note that I was present for the meeting, so if we can add that, please.
Oh. Okay. You are right. You were here. Hmm? Oh, okay. All right.
So it gets caught on.
So in addition to our roll call, we have Chris Rogers, Michael Hoffman, and Antonina.
Cantilla.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other corrections to the minutes? Do I have a motion to approve the,
A motion to approve.
Second.
all in favor to approve the minutes?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Public comment on agenda items. If anyone from the public would like to comment on any of the agenda items, you have 3 minutes. Comments must be limited to items on the agenda.
Oh. It was on meeting.
Phil Gross, 1301 13th Street. First, I must apologize, because obviously I was away and did not have a copy, but Councilman Madway sent me a copy of it, so saying that there was no teeth in it, I was wrong. It's a good start. I'm not overly convinced that 15 units should be allowed. I think it should be smaller because there's always potential of going back and approving it at a later date once all the flooding issues are resolved and traffic studies for each and every project being done, because I checked with the state and I do not believe that there was a total, every project included traffic study made. Each individual project was done on its own merits. And there's nobody that can ever say there's enough roadway and enough ways of getting out of town in case of emergency or beach traffic with the amount of projects that have been approved. It's an impossibility. And we can call in any experts you want, but unless they're paid to say what you want them to say, impossible. So I just asked this board to approve 550, but I would write in a smaller amount of units to be approved for each of those projects. And again, sorry for being off base on that, but thank you for your patience and time.
Any other public comments? And there is one slight change to the agenda. Item 6 is gonna be rolled into item 5, and it's gonna be a pretty minimal discussion on that. So up for discussion is ordinance 2024. No, I don't think so.
Well, there's the brief update on pending projects, which is a.
Oh, okay. Chris, do you wanna just quickly update?
Yeah, in your packets, you have a memo from me highlighting the major points of various major projects that have come before you over the last few years. I won't go into detail unless anybody has any questions. I said in the memo that I'll provide updates on the other minor projects. The 2 lots for you reviewed and approved 2 lots in Buttonwood. That was approved by the city council in February. You approved 1 additional lot on Gray Street in a subdivision. That was approved by the city council in June. You approved the Crozier Fine Arts site plan for 16,000 square feet of additional space. That was approved also by the city council in June. 12 Arbutus Drive, 3 lots, was approved here and approved by the city council in April. And the Markel Trail site plan was approved as a site plan, of course, by the planning commission and approved by city council in August. And all of those plans have also been recorded.
Thanks very much for doing this. It looks like, none of these things have even started yet, and that's why I asked for this, is, you know, we approved stuff years ago now, and they haven't even been started. I was kind of surprised at the River Edge. I drove by it the other day for another reason, and they haven't turned a spade over there for years, literally.
River Edge?
Yeah, is that the one,
Lucas Drive.
it's Lucan's Drive? Yeah,
Yeah, they need to come back with a site plan
yeah,
here.
yeah,
So they're pretty far away from breaking ground.
yeah.
The battery has site plan approval. They have, as far as I know, 95% of their agency approvals. So I didn't reach out to anybody to see what's going on. I just know that they, last time I talked to them, they were waiting for FEMA approval to fill in the floodplain. That's the battery. And then they will proceed to the city council for approval by resolution. But that's the one that's farthest along out of all of these,
Yes,
besides the
there is.
minor ones that I went
Yeah,
over.
because they're almost the most recent as well. The only reason I mention it is that, I mean, in principle, pausing for a year won't make a whole lot of difference. But it doesn't make a lot of difference anyway, because these things take years to come to fruition. So, you know, we looked at River Edge for 11 months before we approved it. So just for the benefit of the commission to think about it in those terms.
Any other questions of Chris? Okay. Ordinance 550. So we are just being asked to basically approve the passage of the ordinance. It's important to realize that if you look at section 6, it says the ordinance is going to become effective on the date of introduction. And it will not impact any of the pending projects. They are exempt from this moratorium.
Madam Chair, if I just one clarification. So the question for the planning commission is a recommendation to council. So you're not taking approval action, like you're just
Right.
recommending to council, whether that's in favor of adoption or against adoption of the moratorium. And the other thing to clarify is it becomes effective if it is passed as of the date of its introduction, which was the September meeting. And so it's the first reading is the introduction. And so should it pass, the moratorium goes back to that date. That's the one.
Thank you.
Does that mean that if we say that we recommend approval of this, that the next city council meeting, they will approve it? It's not gonna drift.
Well, they'll have
off
the
our
opportunity
minds,
to
right?
vote on it.
Yeah,
That's
right, right, okay, thanks.
Michael, do we have the opportunity to make any recommendations within it, or is that not our charge?
You can certainly. So that's recommendations in terms of details of the number of units, in terms of details of the length. This is your opportunity to make a report to council with recommendations.
Do we know, where the expiration date came from?
Yep.
What were the
In ter-
thoughts behind it? Because as Commissioner Batty said, these projects that are pending none of them are probably gonna be not even well on their way by then.
But none of them are impacted.
I
by
know
this.
that, no, but my point is, they're impacting the community when they're built. We won't know an impact of them until definitely after this moratorium is over. You see what I'm saying? Cause I mean, so. I think in my thought process is the city needs to determine how these projects are gonna impact the city. Whether it's services, anything, traffic, anything like that, where we have to do that, and I was just wondering what the background was on why they chose the individual.
I think this is an important point. So the moratoriums as an option, they are a tool in a municipal toolbox, but they are a dramatic step. And they are typically a disfavored step. And if you are going to go that direction, you have to be very targeted to a specific purpose. So generally what you see is the time frame is a time frame only that which is necessary in order to accomplish what the goal is to study. So in this case, to examine the current codes and to look at the adequacy and appropriateness of the codes. Moratoriums as a tool are not to stop until other development catches up. It's purely if it is implemented, it's implemented to review the code for that purpose. Typically, when you go beyond a year, you're not being as narrow. And again, the idea is to be narrow and targeted. So that's where the year came from. December 9th was specifically selected because that is the council meeting at around that year point. But these are, because they are dramatic, they are dramatic steps, they're dramatic tools in the toolbox. It's important that you be targeted and specific.
Are moratoriums extendable?
It can be. And so if council at the 9th, they look at it and they say, we need more time for this purpose, then yes, you can extend it. But again, everything I just said before still applies. So it still has to be narrow and you have to establish that there is the need for that.
Can I follow up on what you just said? You said it's for the consideration of codes, I assume code modification. But section 3 just talks about making sure that we have adequate transportation infrastructure, emergency access, utility, and impacts of multifamily. So can you explain how that relates to codes, especially as these things have already been approved?
Well, then again,
And all those studies got done. I mean, we wouldn't have said that we agreed with it if that work hadn't been done, so.
So again, you have to keep in mind that this isn't applying to applications that have already gone through. And so what the purpose of the moratorium is, we take a step back. So obviously, as the commission knows and as council knows, you can always evaluate and make recommendations to your codes. And so as you modernize your codes and as you evaluate those as you go along, those you can do and are often done without moratoriums. It's just as you go through, you say, we want to take a look at our traffic standards, or we want to take a look at these requirements when we evaluate land development projects and proposals that come through the city. You can do that again without a moratorium. A moratorium is saying we have to take a look at these and we can't consider applications while we do that. But the purpose is to look at your standards. So what section 3 says is there are 4 specific items that that this moratorium would then be implementing and examining. One is the adequacy of transportation infrastructure and related regulatory standards. 2, evaluate the adequacy of emergency ingress and egress. Again, related to this are your codes and standards when you're talking about emergency ingress and egress. 3, evaluate the adequacy of utility infrastructure and related standards. 4, evaluate impacts of multifamily dwellings with more than 15 residential and city services and related services, whether they're impact fees, whether they're other standards. But it has to be tied to a code, to a standard, because that's the purpose. You are taking an opportunity to look at that. And the question when you're evaluating whether moratorium is appropriate or not is whether that pause in, again, the other applications are already in. The pause on new applications is necessary for that evaluation.
But the outcome is gonna be a code update if they find a need for it.
Correct. That's the purpose. The purpose is to evaluate your code. And the evaluation may look at it and say, actually, the standards are appropriate and no recommendations come out. But that's what you're looking at.
So in theory, if this gets approved at some point, there's probably 6 to 9 months of real hard work digging through the code to make sure that we're either meeting, planning for the future, or we're meeting the needs of the community to be ready for quote unquote, the end of that 1-year moratorium, to have a better code book, better plan, better infrastructure plan, whatever in place.
That's the purpose.
Some of this be practical, like, traffic studies, you don't learn about traffic by looking at codes, you look at it doing traffic study. Or, you know what I'm saying? So if it's just looking at code, how would we even know if it was adequate for our environment?
But again, I mean, so the idea here, and you have to think about the whole point. The whole point is to say, is our code up to standard for these types of developments? And so you inherently have to look at what your code and standards are. And so you're correct. And I understand, if I understand the question is, well, we're not gonna know until the traffic actually is here, and then we know what is acceptable or isn't
You can study
acceptable.
it too, you can model, you can model all of these things, and we've seen experts do that. But it looks to me like you want to model more, which kind of leads to another question, which is to Chris, is there someplace else in town where this is we're likely to see a huge development be proposed that you can think of, or that you've looked at? Or that's zoned for it today?
The end of Sixth and South Street where Brochus Eliason's used to be is, my understanding is that people have been looking at that for years.
Yeah, there's been plans for that since.
So I mean, yeah, that is a large plot of land.
Oh, that's where they want to put the dog park, isn't it?
No,
No?
that's where the SPCA used to be.
Oh,
But I
okay.
do want to caution the commission, so what you don't want is you don't want to put in a moratorium for a specific property. You don't
No.
want
No,
to
I'm just
examine.
saying where
No.
where would it affect? I mean, that's just one of the places
We're
that,
not the biggest city in the world.
yeah, there's not many places.
To him.
Yeah, that was just an example of a place. Who is responsible for all this digging into the code and
Anita,
looking
It is.
into this and
It-
presenting is, I mean,
It's Antonina and the city council.
Yeah, at the direction of whatever council decides, I would work with council and our professional staff to determine how to evaluate this.
Yeah, so to come back to the question on impacts, and so again, keep in mind, so you do have a comprehensive plan update coming up. And so again, that's where you're kind of thinking forward in terms of impacts,
Right.
and that comprehensive plan itself may lead to code and whatnot, but that's actually a look of planning and impacts in the future. Again, the question here is you are taking a look at your standards and you're putting, what a moratorium inherently says is we need to push the pause button in order to look at these standards and make sure our code is sufficient to handle this type of development. That's inherently what it is about. And the moratorium ordinance itself has to identify specific topics to evaluate. You can't just say broadly, go in and evaluate it. So to Chris's question is on section 3, and it doesn't specifically say zoning. And the answer there is it has 4 specific topics, and those topics include kind of zoning standards and looking at making recommendations on the city's code, standing, zoning, or otherwise being adequate to support that type of development. And so that's what that gets at. And again, it's you have the 12-month period to look at that and make those determinations. My recommendation for council is, again, I think it really is a 2-step analysis. I think the first step is, do we need to look at these standards? Do we need to look at our code in terms of our code, City of Newcastle code examines and handles these types of developments, these apartment structures with more than 15 units? Do we need to do that? Your answer is yes, we do need to do that. The follow-up question is, do we need to stop applications while we do it? And that's really what you're evaluating when you're making a recommendation on a moratorium.
I hate to ask this question, but I will. Is there magic behind 15 residential units as opposed to 5?
It's the age old question, right? You have to draw the line somewhere. And I think that it is not an arbitrary in the sense of pulling a number out of a hat. What you're doing is you're trying to gauge when you have a development in terms of what is something that's going to be more on the multiple unit as opposed to just a the words are escaping me, but just kind of like a smaller end project. And that's where 15, it could be 15, it could be 20, it could be, but you're kind of gauging that to determine at what point is it kind of a larger impact. And Chris, I don't know if you have a better answer to that than I do.
No, I would say the same thing. You know, that's about the right number where you're, you know, anecdotally going from a minor development to a major development. There's nothing magic about the impacts of, you know, 15 versus 13, and it tips you over the edge magically into some negative impact or potentially negative impact, but it's a reasonable number as a cutoff point.
Would it be unreasonable to reduce that number further?
It's a difficult question to answer because again, because we're dealing with a moratorium, being targeted, being intentional matters. Does it really make a difference 15 to 13? Does it make a difference 15 to 10? I mean, there is going to be a point where it does, but to Chris's, as Chris mentioned, 15 is a point where it is big enough that it's kind of in that what you would think and what you typically see as a major type thing. But it's also small enough that you're still capturing. And again, that's at the end of the day, those are going to be legislative decisions, and you can make a recommendation on that. I don't have a magic answer in terms of where that line is.
I mean, with the exception of the Delaware Street project, which has already been cut down significantly, I believe, from the original plans that came across my desk probably 18 months ago, all of these apartments or all these projects are in the hundreds of units. So, I mean, if somebody's gonna invest the money, they're not gonna invest money in a small potatoes project. They're gonna wanna go for the, you know, most return on their investment long-term. So I don't know that 15's a problem for us. Just again, my personal opinion though. The only other comment I had was that I think that there's probably enough to review, to bring up to date. I mean, just these 4 projects here, other projects I've seen come through previously, all of these are approved with some type of special exemption or conditions. So that leads me to believe that somewhere along the line, there's changes to be made one way or the other.
So then the first question Michael posed was, do we think we need to review our rules, our ordinances, our code?
I don't know. How would we know? Am I allowed to say that?
That's the discussion.
I was a specialist in governance, not in buildings, you know?
I agree with what David said. I mean, obviously, if we're approving so much stuff with special exception, then maybe there needs to be some type of review of these items. I agree with that. I mean, I don't know
It's
how
obviously targeted.
often,
It's targeted to a certain degree, but
I don't know how often or when the last time, like, these items in the code were really looked into, as opposed to, let's just, oh, this isn't working, and taking a piece of something and changing it, versus let's look at the whole code on this section or how it applies to this. So I don't know the history behind the updates of the code. And maybe there's just antiquated information in there anyway that needs to go, or needs to be updated to today's standards.
But Chief, is it your sense, looking at the projects we've approved since you've been on the commission, is it your sense that we've gotten close to the line of safety or other issues, at least as far as you're concerned with these projects?
I don't think safety is an issue. I mean, they have to build the projects to meet current code and all these buildings are gonna be sprinklered. And I've had extensive conversations with all the developers about, making sure that there's room in stairwells for stretchers and access, things like that. Jeff has kind of pushed the hand on some building markings as far as construction types. So we've been lucky with that. I mean, I'll tell you though, and Chief McCabe said the same thing when we had the discussion about River Edge. River Edge is one project that's probably gonna have about 1,000 residents, give or
It's
take.
exceptional.
That's gonna be an impact to our service. I mean, overall here, round math, 2 people per unit. We're looking at close to 2,100 additional residents to the city, which I'm not opposed to, right? Like, I want more people to live here and I want more people to utilize what we have going on. But there's no exception that says that our service and Chief McCabe's service and Public Works is not gonna be impacted by this.
But we did talk about that. The commissioners who were on the commission at the time, we talked about, we even evaluated what the additional headcount would need to be and spoke about that in some detail.
So I think that was only applied to River Edge, not to the mass of
Not to
projects.
not to all the
Right.
rest of them, yeah, that's true. But remember, they're gonna be bringing in more tax revenue and other ways to help pay for these things as well, and we have looked at that. So-
I think.
So
when
there,
we looked
there,
at
there
River
is no
Edge, it was a
impact being
wash.
the city of Newcastle, so the fire company will not see any of that one.
So we should increase our check to you that we just got solicited for.
That is not what I said. Just to be clear. No, but it's, the city doesn't have an impact fee structure. That's something I've talked to council about, some conversation.
Maybe
I've
that
had with
needs
the
to
community.
be considered.
But again, it just. I think the problem is that, we're looking at projects, and we're creating hypothetical problems. None of this is new. This town has had traffic since I was a kid. This town has had flooding since I was a kid. And I'm not much older now, but, it does, the things don't go
All of us
away.
are.
So,
Like, since I was a kid.
yeah, so it's just, how are we gonna address those things? And some of it, it doesn't matter what we do, it's not gonna change, the water's gonna go somewhere. But we need to manage that effectively. So I think that we just need to have a plan for that.
In the execution of section 3, what is the role of the planning commission?
There is none. What's on the agenda?
That will ultimately,
Yeah, that's why I removed it. Go
yeah,
ahead.
that will ultimately be, determined by council. And so the first step, if this passes, then the next step becomes kind of how does council engage in that analysis? The first step is through staff and looking through, but council can, if it chooses, make a referral to the planning commission for assistance and to weigh in on some or all of these factors, but that's gonna be up to council.
And then, but then that, as you said before, that might also impact the update of the comprehensive plan.
Well, just when they're two separate things, and that's the point that I was making is I think on your comp plan update, you're gonna go through that process separate. And so then this process is specifically targeted and it needs to be, it's intentional and the law requires that it be a targeted review. So there may be overlapping factors, but they are two separate reviews.
I understand that, but I'm just, everything touches everything at the end of the day, so I'm just trying to figure out how it all fits together.
So that being said, because of the 5-year comp review coming up and this happening at the same time, how do we effectively communicate what we're looking at with council so they know that we're not
That's gonna be.
counterintuitive to what they're doing? I mean, are we gonna get reporting on that or is there,
She's gonna be coordinating it.
how is that gonna be communicated, I guess?
She's gonna coordinate
So-
what we're doing.
I get that.
So once council, if this passes here and passes at council, once they determine how to go about section 3, that'll be talked about at numerous council meetings. And same for planning commission, however you decide to approach it, Margot will go over that later in the meeting. Oh, in a future meeting, sorry. We'll coordinate who's doing what. And the planning commission will inform council via me and Margot.
I guess my question is there gonna be like a memo sent out to us? I don't always have the opportunity, I don't attend council meetings, I watch them online, but I don't always have the opportunity to watch everything before I get here. I try.
Well, I mean, we as your staff will have to and be obligated to tell you things, you know, to the extent.
Is it gonna be like a
You're involved-
briefing in the meetings, I guess, or is it gonna be a memo that goes out?
I
Like
think
with
we
our
need to
packet?
Figure that out.
Yeah.
Like have
Yeah.
a standing agenda item at least.
I mean, I like to have, like, we have our agendas a week before, I like to have the information a week before, because the weekend of, again, is just not enough time.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if this passes and we're going through things, is that an
Yeah.
effective way that we would be able to have the information to ruminate on before our meeting?
So what would happen is if it's referred by council is you would get a referral. And so it would be up to staff to convey that referral to you. So it would be placed on the agenda and you'd have the topic and you'd have the referral and you'd know coming into that meeting that you were being tasked with this question and this referral, and then you'd have the discussion. It's incumbent and it's the responsibility of staff to prepare you for that topic, so full information and whatnot, so you all can have that discussion during the meeting. So yes, you would get that referral, it'd be on the agenda and you'd have the information.
Thank you.
You made mention of simply ceasing taking new applications. What's the difference, functional difference between that and the moratorium? Or are they one and the same?
They're one and the same. So what the
Oh, okay.
moratorium does is the moratorium says the city will not accept new applications during that period.
Okay.
But
So,
people could come to us and have a consultation during that period if they wanted to.
It's a fine line. I mean, you can always engage your government and you can always ask questions of your government in terms of what the government can say. And I mean, if in a moratorium, the laws may change. I mean, following that period,
Yeah.
it may be different. So we've got to be cautious and careful in terms of the information that's conveyed.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
okay, so is the general consensus, or maybe I just want to vote, is there a feeling, an agreement that a review as requested by the ordinance is in order?
I think so. Does have to be like a motion and all that?
Actually, at this point, I just want to get to know if we can move on to the second question. So,
Mhm.
unofficial. Okay, so then agreeing that it's probably a good opportunity or good time to begin reviewing some of these issues. Do you feel we need a moratorium in order to accomplish that?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I don't think any of the complaints are gonna change, so we need time to look at it, especially with these projects on board, so yes.
Okay,
In the world of buildings, it's a heartbeat.
do I have any further discussion on this ordinance then? Do I have a motion to make an approval,
Recommendation.
a recommendation, thank you, to city council that we feel that we are in agreement with the need to review
Madam Chair, if you can, if it's easier, you can say we recommend approval of the ordinance.
thank you. So do I have a motion to recommend approval of the ordinance?
We'll make that motion.
I'll second.
And I think we want to do a roll call vote for this. Oh, any further discussion? Can I have a roll call vote? David?
David Mieski, yes.
Tim Gibbs, yes.
Margot Rain, yes.
Kristen Zumar, yes.
Braden Barry, yes.
Cynthia Batty, yes.
We're approved.
Recommended.
Recommend, well, the
The motion.
recommendation is approved.
That's what I'm pretty sorry.
I do.
So Margaret, I'll coordinate with you on a memo to council for that recommendation. I got
When
it
do
to
you need it by?
I got it to you tomorrow.
I was gonna say, your window is really narrow right now.
Competing with camels.
Yes.
You are competing with camels, yes.
I think I'll lose.
That's a safe bet too. Okay, item 6 is sort of struck because we rolled that into our discussion and it's really the city council that determines that. And then next is there have been some corrections made and updates on the rules for the planning commission, rules of procedure. There were 2 changes that came out in the what was sent out this morning on Article 1C. If it was changed to 3 consecutive meetings or 4 meetings within 6 months. The or 4 meetings was at the end, that got moved into the middle. And then the other change is in the order of, on page 3, Article 5, in the order of new business to allow for public comments on each agenda item as applicable. So, are there any other, the other changes that we discussed a couple months ago have been rolled in? Any further thoughts?
A couple. Article 1, the planning commission should notify the commissioner should notify the chair at the earliest opportunity. I would say, and the office. It's mostly when we get our documents, it comes from one of the people in the office and I just answer to them. So do you want it to be specifically to the chair or can we also say to the
Well, the problem is if you send it to the office, then they have to get back to me.
And if you send it after 3:30,
Nobody's
you're
there.
potentially not gonna get it.
in that case, the chair should probably send an email out that says, are you coming or not? You know, most people here are busy and, or, you know, are just trying to deal with the volume of mail that we get right now. I just want to make sure it works, that's all.
I think the meetings are scheduled and you know in advance if you're not coming. I think this is more
An emergency.
geared toward, you know, I'm sick, I can't come, or I have to go to Egypt.
On the spur of the moment.
On the spur of the moment. I gotta go back and see that camel.
Are we zooming right now?
Yes, no, we are recording the meeting verbally and video. It is not being zoomed.
All right, so there continues post-pandemic to not be a remote engagement.
I'm sorry.
There's not an opportunity for remote engagement for
No, there is not.
commissioners.
No.
No.
Well, if you guys don't want to do it, it's just my recommendation, because that's what I think a lot of us have been doing for the last year, so if you want to change that, that's fine, but whatever. Okay, on C, you explained very fast what you were doing, Margot, and I didn't understand it.
I just moved the wording around so that it made sense.
Okay, so how does it, just read it to me.
You have it, don't you? 3 consecutive meetings or 4 meetings within 6 months. If you fail to attend 3 consecutive meetings or 4 meetings within 6 months, it may constitute cause for removal.
Oh, okay, I thought you said you changed it, that's why I was asking.
That's
No.
what she changed it to. She said the 4
Okay.
months part was at the end.
Okay. Then in Article 2, officers, the duties of the chair, develop the agenda for the meeting. I would be happier if it was with input from commissioners and advisors. I think it probably is, but you know, otherwise we're just tools here and I think we need some kind of voice.
I get people who ask me to put things on the agenda. Obviously. And somebody has
Want to
something.
clarify for future, maybe future people who are not you. I'm saying, this is a document that's going beyond
True.
us, I'm sure.
Do we have? I guess it doesn't matter.
I mean, I don't know, the wording doesn't really matter to me for that because develop could mean a lot of different things. It could mean input from other people, it could be doing it on your own. It could be a combination of things depending on how the chair prefers to do that. So I think just leaving it at develop the agenda is fine, in my opinion, but
If you got a chair at some point who preferred to do it without taking input from anybody, then you mind. That's my concern.
I think that you have two issues. I think the one is what is the task, and the task is developing the agenda, which is why it's drafted the way that it is. I think the question of if you have a rogue chair and a chair who isn't taking in feedback and you wanted a mechanism to force items, that would be a different procedure. There are different organizations that, you know, for example, two commissioners may request, like, you can do things like that. My recommendation is if you encounter that problem, then you can implement the solution. But unless that is a problem you encounter, just having it as developing the agenda is the normal standard course.
Okay. Then, on Article 5, order of business, D, new business items, public comments, what was the language that we talked about updating that to?
It's
On each agenda item or?
Madam Chair, I can take this one.
Please.
So there was the current operation of the planning commission is to have at the outset of the meeting, public comment on any agenda item. That makes sense at a council level, where you can have a discussion on beyond the scope. When you have a planning commission, especially when you are hearing public hearings, which you have to invite the public comment during that agenda item, the recommended course is that you put the public comment within the item. And so just as it's drafted here, where number 4 is public comment, that's what it was changed to. So public comment was a separate D, and it was instead moved to 4 to be as part of each agenda item.
Okay, can we include the word only on there, or is that implied?
Say that where would only be?
Public comments on agenda items only.
Yeah, that's implied. So that would be on for each new business item.
Okay,
That means that you're gonna be this means that you're gonna be accepting public comment on a development
item.
application.
yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That totally makes sense. Yeah, just, as long as people understand that that is the only topic that they're gonna be
Correct.
talking about.
That's
Okay,
correct.
So if we have multiple items, then there's multiple public comment opportunities.
Yeah.
Correct. That's right.
Thank you.
we've done that in the past, so, okay, and then the final one is that, the lowly hack report is still not on the standing agenda. And that is matter of code for the city, so maybe we could put it on. And I will try to keep it very short, and I hope whatever my successor does keeps them short too, but
You mean
Keeping-
below E, like an E?
yeah,
It would be E and
it
then.
would be E and then
adjourn-
German would be H.
Adjournment would be F.
Hack report. Got it.
Oh, F, yeah. So, sorry, I'm giving you more agenda items and not telling you what they are. That was all the comments I had. Thank you.
Any clarification? Maybe. Article 7, number A, letter A. You may not discuss matters pending before, not with anybody. Anybody at all?
Correct.
I'm just clarifying that.
No, that is correct. And this is a best practice, given the nature of what the planning commission does. And so at the end of the day, especially when there's an application, due process requires that any discussion or consideration on that item is in the public session and on the record. And so the idea there is that by not talking about that item with anybody, commission or otherwise, it necessarily will bring the discussion here, which is where it needs to be.
So if a citizen comes to me and talks to me about something that I just listen, or do I just say, send an email or come to a meeting.
In the meeting,
And
that's exactly right.
walk away. I just want to make sure that I understand.
Yeah, and that is, and you can actually say, you can say just that, you know, say, for the sake of the record, it's really important that the discussion happen at the meeting. I invite you to come to the meeting and share your comments there, and that's it.
It's more important that they come to the meeting and share with everybody than to have your ear at a particular moment.
That's putting you in a bad place.
Yeah,
And tell you how you would pitch it to the person.
Does that then limit our ability to converse with the three of you?
no, and then, thank you for that clarification. Staff is excluded from that.
Okay.
You can ask your questions of staff, you can ask your questions, and so that you are prepared and you have the background,
Okay.
that you can do,
But not council, just staff.
not count.
Three of you. I just wanna,
And Max.
Yep, and Max, that's right.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, so,
And the one thing, just to kind of put a fine point on that. You can ask us questions, but we are going to be careful in terms of what we discuss outside of a meeting as well. In other words, we will provide the information that you need, the background for it. But the key here is discussion on the topic is to be where all the commissioners get the same information and in the same position.
so if I come to you with something, does that mean whatever the answer is goes out to everybody then? So they have, I mean.
We will,
To me, that's the only way to really get everybody has the same information, is saying, you know, Commissioner Zumar asked this question and this is the information that was provided.
yes, so what will typically happen, so that is what staff should strive for in terms of having you armed with all of the same information, but inevitably there may be something where you pick up and say, Anthony, what is this? Or when did we get this? Those types of things, you know, those are clarifying questions, which are fine. There's a line, it's not a bright line rule, but your North Star should be making sure that your discussion happens when you are all there in the meeting with everybody present.
okay. So the change we made was to add hack report as a standing agenda item. And that is it, correct? And we can approve them. Do I have a motion? Or is there any further discussion on our rules of procedure?
Just one from me, and Tim will understand why I'm asking this. Because he actually sat through a hack meeting, and we managed to not kill ourselves. And forgive me for not knowing this off the top of my head. In the Historic Area Commission, if somebody puts a proposal in, a clock starts ticking. And we've identified the administrative ways in which the clock stops ticking. So, for example, if we don't render a decision within 60 days of a particular thing, it's assumed approved, which may not be our intent. Is there any kind of ticking clock that we need to cover off in this administrative thing here?
That would be in the code. That wouldn't be in the rules of procedure. That would have to be codified.
So there's
A
nothing
deemed-
codified as.
A deemed approved rule. Some places have that.
And that's correct. And the recommendation, again, as a best practice is you don't want to put those in your rules of procedure. Because the danger when you put something like that in your rules of procedure is you create a greater risk of a conflict. So what if your rules say something the code, at the end of the day, the code controls?
Still, awareness is important because you could make a mistake by accident and end up having a sticky wicket. So that's the only reason I brought it up. Is that we've seen that in the Historic Area Commission.
Are you asking if we have any?
If we have any in.
So she's
planning.
asking for clarification if there are any time restrictions that limitations or timetables that we have to adhere to when things are presented to us.
So I'll answer that two ways. One, I would have to take a look at the code to be able to answer confidently whether there are or there aren't. I can't answer that question as I sit here right now. The second thing I will say is, again, given your review, you handle different types of applications, a little bit different than Hack in that way. And so it's more important that as an application is presented to you, that if there are any of those elements, staff arms you with that information saying, hey, there's a time frame. So again, I don't know the answer as I sit here, but that would be something we wanted to do when that application comes up.
And I think as a rule, like most of the stuff that comes past us ends up going to city council for.
Usually
final
recommending.
approval. So it's not that it just sits.
That's true. I suppose HAC has more power than we do. How about that?
Do we have any more discussion? Can I call for a question? Do I have an approval or recommendation to approve?
So this one actually is a motion to approve.
Okay, so a motion to approve the rules of procedure or as modified.
Motion. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. And I believe they go on to be finally approved by the city council? Okay. Ag report?
Yes, HAC's had a couple of meetings in the meantime. I think we missed one, which is partly why, but we had a catch-up meeting on Thursday, August 29th. And Kathy, this stuff is in the agenda for that meeting. But there were 4 decisions made, one for 150 East 4th Street. The petitioner wanted to remove the front porch on their building, and that was denied. 42 West 4th Street, build a new pergola behind the house, that was approved. 300 Delaware Street, this was slightly interesting, replace gutters and a garage door. The commission approved a garage door made of metal, which is unusual. But the circumstances of the building and its physical proximity to dampness made it a reasonable argument to accept a metal door on their garage. So it is an unusual decision, but it was a very interesting conversation. If anybody cares, it's worth listening to. But we made a determination to accept a metal door. And then finally, 28 East 3rd Street, a new porch in the back of the house. It's really nice to see people improving their houses in the historic area. More complex, on October 10th, we reviewed a petition for 122 Delaware Street with someone whose house roof is visible from public right-of-way on both sides, which is one of the big criteria for the Historic Area Commission approvals. They wanted to install solar shingles on the house. And all of us want to do more solar. It wasn't that we don't want to do solar. It's just that they didn't look very good. And the petitioner also didn't appear to talk through how it would all happen. And so that was denied. But that doesn't mean that solar is not allowed in the historic area. There are buildings with solar panels on the roofs, and we don't want to discourage that. But in that case, we said no, stop the clock as well. And then the petitioner can come back and re-explain if they want to. In that meeting, we did something else. I think as you all know that we've been working on documentation for homeowners, business owners, real estate agents and lawyers, which is still in process. But it's become clear that we need to provide contextual and visual explanation for certain things. And so I'm not going to hand it out because we're not done with it, but we've put together a document on signage in the historic commercial district. And what this document does is it goes through the city code as it pertains to the design standards and guidelines from the Historic Area Commission. The two are tied together legally, and getting people to understand that has been challenging even on the commission. So we put together a document on that, and then we've had a do and don't section with pictures. We do have to update this to take out pictures of local signage because we don't want people to say, wait, you don't like my sign. It's not the goal, but the goal is to help business owners not make costly mistakes. Because if you buy a sign for hundreds or thousands of dollars and it doesn't meet the standards, it's got to be taken down. So we're going to try to wrap this up in our next meeting. We have a special meeting at the end of this month. And I think we're all pretty proud of this work. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry. Don't they have to get approval of the sign before they put it up?
They do, but they don't. they don't ask for it.
Okay, no, I was wondering.
Yes, you would think that, well, and that's been part of what the Historic Area Commission has been struggling with, is that they should be asking, and that's being clarified also in this document. But if all you do is read the codes, your eyeballs cross. It's really, really hard. So we're trying to lay it out so people don't make a mistake, and so that the integrity of the streetscape is maintained in the historic area. So that is my report.
I have one question.
Yes,
You said you denied the removal of a front porch.
we did.
What was the reasoning for wanting to remove it?
I believe they felt that it was rotted or something like that. We all went and looked at it and it wasn't. The problem really was that it was on a building on Fourth Street, which was 4 row houses, brick row houses connected. And this porch broke up the block-like look of that building. It was pretty. I don't know why they wanted to take it off. They had their own reasons. But it would have materially changed the effect on that part of the block. You know, we're trying to keep it looking beautiful.
So looking big picture, and obviously we're well after the fact, and you've already rendered your decision, but looking big picture, my concern because it becomes if they don't want it, and they don't maintain it, it becomes a structural
That's her
integrity
problem.
problem.
That's her problem.
I
That's a
under-
code enforcement
I
problem.
understand that we don't have a code enforcement officer right now, not by lack of good
We're gonna
effort,
have one soon, right?
We will.
but still,
I understand.
it's.
Um,
I guess my question or my point that I'm raising is, and I understand the point of the Historic Area Commission, I'm not here to argue that,
Yeah.
but at some point, we're forcing people to spend money that maybe they don't have or don't want to spend.
that is not material. If you read the design guidelines, what it costs to preserve the historic integrity of the house is not a material issue. Come see my house and let me explain to you how much it costs to maintain that house. You can come right now and watch the jeweler fix all the windows.
No, I'm just saying it's, my concern becomes long-term of if they don't want to take care of it. To a certain point, you know, on the surface, we can put all the coats of paint on it that we want, make it look nice, but if we go there and try to take someone out of their home in a stretcher or stair chair and my
I hear
guys
you.
fall through,
I
I'm
hear
gonna have a
you.
bigger problem.
But let's not confuse a homeowner's refusal to maintain their home with maintaining the historic character of our important historic city.
I don't disagree. I'm just saying that it's one comes with the other.
It doesn't. Code enforcement should be taking care of that.
Again, I understand
Yeah.
that, but
If someone refuses to do it, then they can have fines.
you don't have to pay them either.
Then they lose their house and then somebody else buys it and fixes it. You know, I hate to be harsh on this, but,
It does kind of go along with owning a house
Yeah.
and
No,
responsibility of a
I-
historic district. I mean,
people should know the rules when they move in and they're,
and it doesn't even have to be a
And
historic
I
district.
believe that guy down in the corner there has a thing sitting before the city council now that everybody who buys a house here signs a paper that they understand that they're in a historic district and they're supposed to maintain it. You know, the reason that our property values are what they are around here is because of that. The reason that we have tourists who come here is because of that.
I'm not disagreeing. I'm just
So-
raising a concern from an operational standpoint.
I
that's all.
understand, and that puts a fine point on the extreme importance of code enforcement. And if you wanna.
But code enforcement, just so we're all clear, code enforcement needs to happen outside of the historic area also.
It certainly does.
So, I mean, we can't focus code enforcement and as a avenue of hack all the time. It needs to be
Oh, it's- well-
overreaching of this,
But
all
don't,
city
don't
area.
confuse the two. I think you're confusing the two. I mean, if you want to talk about a code enforcement nightmare, there's one on Delaware Street right now. Everybody knows which one that
I think,
is.
Madam Chair, we're getting a little off agenda, but
Yeah, I would agree. I think that concludes our meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.
Wait,